Welcome to Diplomacy Today, a podcast series by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In this podcast series, we invite diplomats, government officials, opinion makers, and academics to discuss Pakistan's relations with countries around the world, its diplomacy, and the important role that Pakistani diplomats play around the world. I'm your host, Mumtaz Zahra Baloch, spokesperson, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And it is my great honor today to have with us the 29th Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Ambassador Tehmina Janjua. Ambassador Janjua, welcome to Diplomacy Today. You started your career in 1984 and rose up to the level of Foreign Secretary, becoming the 29th Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. Before that, you were permanent representative of Pakistan to United Nations office in Geneva. You also served as Pakistan's ambassador to Italy with concurrent accreditation to Albania, San Marino, and Slovenia. You were also the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it is my great honor and pleasure to have you with us today. Let's start with the journey that you had over the last 35 years. And in this 35 years, the diplomacy has changed, the world around us has changed, and the challenges that Pakistan faces in terms of its foreign policy, that has also evolved. Can you share your perspective on how this journey was in terms of Pakistan's foreign policy, how it evolved from the time you started till you became the Foreign Secretary, and how has our diplomacy matched with those challenges?
Well, thank you, Mumtaz. Yes, it's been 30 plus years of working as a diplomat and at the ministry as well, which has been absolutely a great honor for me. When in 1984 I joined, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was then very busy trying to deal with the Soviet presence in Afghanistan. So there was Afghanistan that remained a constant in our relationship. So we've had several constants during my 30 plus years. And as far as Pakistani diplomacy is concerned, we have been able to use this period to build partnerships for security, and as well as at the same time also giving ourselves space for independent decision making. You see Pakistan in the 50s and 60s also developing partnerships for security as well, and whether it was CETO-CENTO or any other partnerships. But simultaneously, we gave ourselves space to develop our own independent policy as well. And this could be seen in our relationship with China. So while we were building partnerships, we were also looking at what was important from the independent decision-making processes. And this has been a clear constant that has been there in Pakistan's diplomacy. We have this principle of building partnerships for security and leaving aside our own space, preserving our space for independent decision making.
How do you see the current state of Pakistan-US relations, and do you have a prescription or can you project how this relationship will go forward?
You see, the United States itself is in election flux. So it's not very clear how the things will come out after the elections. whether it will be President Biden who will continue or not in the election process, whether it will be Mr. President Trump who will do so. But whatever, I think the most important thing that we need to focus on is to look at our priorities and focus on our priorities. We do not need to be led by what the US priorities are. And that's where sometimes we falter, because we sometimes allow US priorities to sort of overshadow our priorities, and that's not an advisable way of doing diplomacy as far as Pakistan is concerned. It's been difficult times for Pakistan in the US, but I think the most important thing is to keep a steady hand with the US and keep your focus on your own priorities.
While you were the Foreign Secretary, you also focused a lot on Pakistan-China relations. And I know that has been a special area of your interest, and while you were Foreign Secretary, you also were instrumental in opening of a special directorate in the ministry dealing with the CPEC. How did you find this relationship?
There's one thing that's constant in Pakistan diplomacy, and that is, Pakistan's foreign relations is its very, very important relations with China. China, I believe, is a country that has stood by us in the most difficult times, and has been able to support Pakistan not only at the strategic economic level, but at the people's level as well. And yes, CPEC was something that I also worked on hard within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We set up a separate directorate of CPEC, and then it was on our initiative, Ministry of Foreign Affairs initiative, that we set up this committee on joint implementation, which was now being discussed a lot within the JCC as such. So China is a story I can go on and on about, because it truly touches my heart, not only from the professional point of view, but from also a personal point of view. The Chinese are amazing people, and they will always, I believe, stand by Pakistan, as Pakistan has stood by China in the most difficult, top priority issues.
Now we see there is this rivalry between United States and China. Both countries are major powers in the world. Pakistan has good relations with both countries. How do you think we should navigate this challenging situation of US-China rivalry?
Well, there's a lot that's been written on US-China rivalry and how to navigate it. There is the question of whether we balance it or we hedge it, or we try and see or join one of the alliances. I think at the end of the day, we have to, it's a difficult decision for us. But I think the one thing that we need to remember always is that it's best that such confrontation does not take place, because such confrontations are never good for the region, for countries in the region. And I think the Chinese do try to ensure that this confrontation doesn't take place, military confrontation. But if that happens and we are asked to choose sides, then I think we have to remember who has stood by Pakistan the most.
Mm-hmm. So these are difficult choices, you say.
Absolutely.
What do you think are the key challenges for Pakistan's diplomacy these days? And do you think we as a ministry and we as diplomats are ready to face these challenges?
The challenges we have almost continue to be the same for a long time. There's one, we've just spoken about Afghanistan, that is a challenge, and I think there we need to be more reflective of the realities. We cannot allow a confrontational situation with Afghanistan as such. When I was Foreign Secretary, we had the great important thing that we did was to have APAPs, which was very important, which provided mechanisms for resolution of issues between our two countries. That was with the Ghani government, but then the Ghani government wasn't there anymore and the Taliban came in. So I think it may be difficult for the Taliban to imbibe the principles in APAPs, but it still provides certain areas that can help Pakistan. We don't have to bring the agreement to the table again. We just have to use some of the principles from there.
What about the terrorism issue that has become front and center in our relations?
We need to talk to Afghanistan about the terrorism issue in a mature manner, and that's something that's critical. And we need to have somehow sit with the table. We can't keep on having a confrontational relationship with all our neighbors. So that's one thing. Terrorism is an issue in our India relationship as well. Now with India, we have this is a constant that has been there, and with India we need to be we have to understand the nature of the Indian polity right now, and there's a lot of discussion in Pakistan right now on whether to have to start conversations with India. I think the most important thing we need to do is build our own strength and then talk about India, because India is not going to talk to you in the current state of lack of the strength you need for positive negotiations to take place. It is a Hindutva-driven, agenda-driven foreign policy that's there. It is also they're riding on the high horse of economic strength. So there are lots of things that we need to look at. Then there's this issue of people talking about opening trade with India, and I say, well, there's no such thing as not opening trade with India, but we have to see the repercussions of opening trade with India on our traders, on our industrialists, on our agriculture sector.
Let's move on to your time as the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, the 29th Foreign Secretary. You were Foreign Secretary at a very crucial time in Pakistan's history. So can you share with us some of the major issues or challenges that came across your desk? You mentioned a few with respect to our relations with the United States. Some other important areas that you would like to share with us?
Well, to begin with, when I became Foreign Secretary, the political situation in Pakistan was in flux. So I served 4 Prime Ministers and 6 Foreign Ministers / advisors / PM, SAPM. And it was challenging. Firstly, it was challenging because you needed to ensure that there would be continuity in policy, that people would not go ahead and just make statements or issue tweets, something that would not necessarily be good for the foreign policy perspective. So keeping the ship steady was a major challenge in these 4 governments that I held. But when the PTI government, Imran Khan, came into power, there was a degree of the economy was not in a good shape. So all our time was invested in ensuring that we undertook policy and visits abroad which would help us in the economic and trade sector. We had the Pulwama, Balakot attacks as well. And I must commend Pakistan Air Force for the actions they took and were able to deal with the attack that the Balakot attack, which of course there are several inputs into it that what happened, but we understand that there was only 1 tree that was affected. And it was, in order to ensure that there was no escalation that would take place, because there was a possibility of escalation. There was one evening when we had information that the Indians were about to fire 9 missiles on different cities of Pakistan. So we had to use active diplomacy to talk about to our partners, the P5 and others, and that was averted. But the most important thing that we learned, there was a lot of discussion on that period on how to respond to Balakot, and some said military response. In the Foreign Office, we were clear that this was India bullying us, and therefore it was important to have a military response as such. And the military response did send a clear message that if you mess with us, we will have a response. And that's, I think, what happened after Pulwama. Then, of course, we also did not want the escalation of this difficult situation. And as a result, it was decided to let go Abhinandan, their pilot who had parachuted into Pakistan.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. That was a very interesting and important period of our history, especially in relations with India. You mentioned you worked with, as Foreign Secretary, you worked with 4 Prime Ministers and 6 Foreign Ministers. So that must have been a challenge. So what kind of adjustments does a Foreign Secretary have to make in whenever there is a new boss? And what kind of adjustments do you have to make in steadying the ship of foreign policy, as the words that you used? So what is the contribution that a Foreign Secretary makes whenever this kind of transition is taking place?
Well, number one, you have to be keep your cool at all times. Mm-hmm. Number 2, you must have all your talking points written down and give it to the Foreign Minister. Once you hand over the talking points to the Foreign Minister, it's not your responsibility anymore. Actually, it is your responsibility, but you try to ensure that they follow the line of the institution, because it's not the Foreign Secretary, it's the institution that has certain principles to adhere to. You have to remain very mature and hard-nosed, clear about your policy. You have to be very clear about your policy. And that is where, and I can assure you, Mumtaz, having served 4 Prime Ministers and having served 6 Foreign Ministers, SAPMs, it's my view that when the institution writes down its policy, gives its policy in writing, or gives advice in writing, it's very difficult for the political leadership not to listen to it. And that's a big, big plus. And that's where we need to have our best officers at the top, who have the capacity and who have the gumption, if I may say so, to say what is important and what should be our policy.
You were Pakistan's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations Geneva. You served in Pakistan's missions in multilateral settings in New York, in Rome, FAO, and of course Geneva. So I would like to ask you some questions about Pakistan's multilateral diplomacy.
Sure.
Do you think there is need for reform of the United Nations, and what do you think should be the responsibility or the priorities for countries like Pakistan in this domain?
Well, UN has been reformed and reformed and reformed. Actually, whenever you go to the UN in New York or to go to Geneva, there's some reform of something taking place. UN has not been able to live up to its expectations in the area of peace and security, for example. And that's evident in the case of Gaza as it is. It's had, on the issue of human rights as well, you can see it in Gaza. You can see UN not being able to fulfill its role in long-standing issues like Kashmir and Palestine, in the current issue in Ukraine, which could blow up into a more widespread war. and the situation in the Middle East as well. So, but that's UN could try. UN Secretary General has tried his best, but the burden falls basically on the membership of the UN, and the membership has its own games to play, which is unfortunate because the situation globally is very difficult.
You mentioned reform, and you said there have been several cycles of reform in the United Nations. There was one reform with which you were particularly associated with, and that was when the Human Rights Commission transformed into this Human Rights Council that exists now. So my question is, did the Human Rights Council live up to the expectation and the vision of its founders, and how do you assess its performance till now?
Well, the Human Rights Council has not necessarily been able to live up to its expectations. However, it provides a forum for people to bring their human rights violations issues to the Council. From the Commission to the Council, there was expectation that it was basically a very strong attempt by our Western partners to convert the Commission into a council, to have a smaller council, to have a smaller advisory body instead of the subcommission, and to have other mechanisms with the Council, so that they thought that this will help them put some kind of pressure on developing countries as well. But they didn't realize that the Council was able, with some of its mechanism, like the UPR, the Universal Periodic Review, where countries go and present their reports and are questioned on, is equal for everyone. It's not just for developing countries, for developed countries as well, and it irked them a lot. But it did help some of the developing countries to bring up issues to the floor. The problem is that geopolitics is such that they use the UN, the Human Rights Council as well, to ensure that their views are projected more effectively. So you see more and more resolutions now coming up in the Council that are against some developing countries as well. Human Rights Council did bring out a number of resolutions. I think it was 16, 18 plus on Palestine, but this was before Gaza. Now, since the tragedy in Gaza is taking place right before our eyes, in full sight, the Council has not been able to come to a decision or some direction in this regard. The most important thing that's happened is that Special Rapporteur on Palestine and some other rapporteurs have been able to bring out reports on the situation in Gaza.
Ambassador, Pakistan has been elected as the non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, and we will be taking over this seat at the UN Security Council in January next year. What do you think should be the priorities for Pakistan when we are members of the Council for the 2-year term?
I think Pakistan has to put its weight behind issues of peace and security, because that's where things have been lacking within the Council. Now, the Council is constructed in a way where you have the permanent members who get together and sort of decide on issues, and where the P5 agree on, then it's very difficult for the non-permanent members to sort of come in and bring any amendments as such to. But we've seen some positive things that have happened. Algeria has been able to pursue some issues within the Council with regard to Gaza and with regard to Palestine and other issues as well. So there are possibilities that as Pakistan one can undertake.
Mm-hmm. And you were also the first woman to crack the glass ceiling in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs by becoming the first woman to assume this post. What were the challenges that you faced over the years as a woman diplomat reaching this position, and do you think when you reached the top you were able to appreciate the opportunities that you saw you were given, or you basically earned, and how actually is the journey of other women who are coming after you?
Well, obviously, it was, as you say, cracked the ceiling. I'm not too sure if I cracked the ceiling, but I got there. Mm-hmm. And I can, just to let you know, there was a conference in Rome when I was there as ambassador on women in diplomacy, and they were talking about ceiling of breaking the ceiling or whatever. And I said one thing which I truly believe in now as well, is that the only thing that will take me up to the top will be my hard work, my merit, and a recognition thereof. And I was lucky to have all three. I don't know about the others, but definitely it was a great, my male colleagues, my senior colleagues recognized that and were able to decide that I would be the Foreign Secretary. And I think it's something that upgrades the importance of women participation as diplomats in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I can tell you I'm really excited that there are more and more women coming in. There's almost an intake now of women is about 40 to 50%, and they're rising higher and higher, and there are more women ambassadors and consul generals, and at the ministry as well. You are one good example of it. And I've seen you in action, so I can say for sure that it makes me really proud to have colleagues like you reaching the top. I hope that my being Foreign Secretary did have an impact on more women joining the Foreign Service. It may be because the Foreign Office is a good employer, or it may be just because and it's a place where merit is recognized. People have different experiences. I've had absolutely amazing experiences in the Foreign Service, and I appreciate the work that it was hard work and drudgery in many ways, but it was recognized and it got me to the top. The most important thing is to focus, as far as women is concerned, is to focus on merit. And there should be no gender bias, mm-hmm. whether in favor of men or women. Mm-hmm. There should be no gender bias. And therefore, I'm convinced that those who move with merit and do not expect special treatment, mm-hmm. whether men or women, mm-hmm. Should be able to reach to the top.
Mm-hmm. And you served as a role model for women following you, starting with us. From our very first posting, we learned a lot from you, the encouragement that you gave the aspiring and young officers, especially personally I'm grateful for the encouragement and the education that I got from you. So thank you very much for that. Looking back at your career in the Foreign Service right from 1984, would there be something you would have done differently, or even taken the decision to join this service or some other profession? How do you see all these 30 plus years when you look in retrospect?
I don't think I would have joined any other service. When I joined the service, you have to fill in a form. Basically, it says which service you want, and I said I'll write 11 times. Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Foreign Service of Pakistan. So I was very focused on that, and I knew I wanted to be in the Foreign Service of Pakistan. Would I have done things differently? I think I've been one of those lucky ones who got opportunities all along and was recognized by my colleagues, my senior colleagues as well. So I think whether I went to New York, when Ambassador Jamshed Marker asked me to come there, whether I went to wherever I went, or whatever I did was, I think, a lot of appreciation, my appreciation is for where I landed, and I don't think I would have done things differently. Maybe as Foreign Secretary, when I was Foreign Secretary, there were a few things that I wanted to do, but obviously there was a limited time. One was to work on the training of our young diplomats. That I thought was critical, and then of course this was something I really wanted to do, and then to introduce specialization in our work, because I thought we are great generalists, but we need to also have specialists. We have a few specialists, but I think specialization was something that I really thought was important. But we have a limited time, and there are several other demands on our time, so I wasn't able to achieve that. But it was something that I really wanted to look at.
Ambassador Tehmina Janjua, thank you so much for joining us for Diplomacy Today. It was an engaging conversation. It was enlightening. We discussed Pakistan's relations with countries around the world, Pakistan's diplomacy, especially in the multilateral arena, and the important role that you have played, the contributions you have made as the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, and even prior to that, in promoting Pakistan's interests abroad. We are grateful to you that you joined us. We are grateful for your service, for women of this service, and for me personally, you are a role model and inspiration, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mumtaz. It's truly a pleasure to be here, and I must say, seeing you doing this job as spokesperson and doing this job here, it's very satisfying, and I wish you all success in your work.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our program. Today's episode with Ambassador Tehmina Janjua, Pakistan's 29th Foreign Secretary, and thank you for joining us until our next episode, and please join us again.